Horror Convos, come on in, have a seat, stay a while, take a load of vibe into the beat. We can just chill, have a drink, say what's on our mind. Never know what you're thinking, hey, it could be neat. Fear is everywhere, in your mind, on the street, in the earth, in the stars. Scary things you left for free. What you gotta say about it? Having fun, you and me. If you got nowhere to go, no place to be, just relax, have a chat, but don't think it's therapy. If you get too afraid, there's a door you can leave. Good night and be well, maybe talk again. We'll see. Good night and be well. Maybe talk again. We'll see. You can night be well. Maybe talk again. We'll see.
Hello, my masochistic cabal of fresh human flesh artists. Welcome to Horror Convos, a casual, relaxing, and occasionally funny podcast where we choose one horror topic per episode and discuss anything related to it that we want. Movies, TV, novels, comics, video games, radio dramas, personal experiences. Nothing is off limits here. I often have guests join as we share our opinions and compare examples that portray the subject. New episodes release every other Wednesday. Horror Convos is available to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and come hang out at the Horror Convos Facebook page to share your thoughts and leave suggestions. If you want to listen to the podcast without ads, you can go to patreon.com/horrorconvos. Tier 1 membership gets you full episodes ad-free, as well as exclusive content like outtakes that didn't make it into the podcast. Tier 2 membership gets you access to vote on what we discuss in special event episodes. We appreciate everyone who donates to help our little podcast grow. That's patreon.com/horrorconvos. If you'd like to be a guest and have a subject you're passionate enough to talk about, you can send an email to keithhorrorconvos@yahoo.com, all one word, all lowercase. I can't realistically have everyone on, but will review every email I can. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss when our newest content is uploaded. I'm your host, Keith Harris, and today's podcast is a big one. My friend Alfonso is back with me to dissect one of horror's most iconic franchises, which he happens to be a major fan of. He knows almost as much about this one as he does Halloween. This series may have sadly gone steadily downhill over time in both quality and reception, until fading into the tragic bowels of the unwanted reboot abyss, but it did influence generations of horror IPs that would come after it, along with countless goth, punk, emo, and/or fetish awakenings. And don't even get me started on how much business it brought to Hot Topic and Spencer's Gifts. Yeah, I was there. I saw it. This was back in the 90s and 2000s when shopping malls were still common and dinosaurs walked the earth.
No! I ain't old!
It's still arguably the most successful, influential, and globally recognized adaptation of immortalized author Clive Barker's writing, with a close second, in my opinion, being Candyman. He even wrote and directed the first movie in this series himself. How many people actually know much about Clive or even recall what he looks like without Google? No idea. Some people just don't like the spotlight, and I don't blame him. People be crazy. Outside of film, this brand has continued to sustain itself in the pop cultural eye for almost 40 years now, via merchandising from toys to comics, decorative shirts, crossovers, and estimated millions of cosplays, collectible cards, and appearances in video games like, probably most recently, Dead by Daylight. Without further ado, it's time to carve deep into the white meat of the one, the only, Hellraiser.
We have such sights to show you.
I'd also like to apologize in advance to the French. You'll see what I mean later.
Spoiler alert!
You're a much more well-versed Hellraiser fan than I am. How were you first introduced to the film?
So this was a long time ago. Well, not long time ago, I would say. I think the first time I ever saw Hellraiser was in 2009 when I was in 9th grade. But this was before I became a horror fan in the fall of 2020, so a little over 5 years ago. I was just a teenager, so I didn't have really much to think about it. It wasn't until like as I grew older, especially once 2020 came around, and afterwards, I got to thinking about the franchise more, and I rewatched Hellraiser a few years ago. I watched some reviews of the franchise, some YouTube fan channels about it, and I've watched pretty much all the movies except the 2011 reboot that was Hellraiser Revelations, which I thought was horrible. I've only seen parts of it, the found footage style stuff. I watched the one on Hulu that came out about 3 years ago now, excuse me. Hellraiser, it sort of piques my interest a little bit because of the concept from Clive Barker. And it's that I know some people go into it for, exploring the pain and pleasure and pushing the limits of the human body.
Oh God, I've been so bloody naughty. Oh, I need to be taught a lesson and you're the one to do it. Ah! Oh, thank you! Thank you!
And those concepts. For me, I'm more invested in this alternate way of looking at it, which is Pinhead, or the Hell Priest as he's called, or called in the novel.
Who you calling Pinhead?
He's lawful evil, or was, as before the franchise descended into a little bit of madness. And what I mean by that is basically, I'm using the first film as an example from 1987. The original story was that the Hellraiser antagonists, which were the Cenobites, but, probably mostly Frank and Julia, that the Cenobites followed a code. They only took somebody to hell if they opened up the puzzle box, or the lament configuration, right? And that was, for me, was very intriguing, okay, because you have these people, demons, or angels to some, as Pinhead famously says in the first film. They only took you if you opened the box, because you had to have this desire. He kind of says that in the second movie, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. But I was just enamored by it, that concept of a type of evil that just doesn't kill just because, or doesn't do bad just because, that they have to follow a certain protocol procedure. But I kind of go into it a little bit later in this episode, but as the franchise progressed, as later sequels came into existence, especially by Hellraiser 3 and 4, Bloodline, it no longer became the case where the Cenobites followed this rule of not taking anybody that did not open the box. They ended up just doing nothing more than slicing and dicing, just like Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, other people, other examples. But yeah, that's how I got into it, is when I was exposed when I was a teenager, and then now that I'm an adult, I've had more time to reflect upon it over 10 years later.
Yeah. I'm not nearly as well versed in the franchise as a lot of people. I was personally never really into, blood and guts, like the appeal of that in the horror genre. I like I've said before, I can tolerate it from a visual standpoint to, as like an audience experience. I can grit my teeth and bear it up to a certain point. I have my limits. It's like, that's one reason why I will never watch Terrifier, not only because I don't think there's enough story to justify it being a franchise. Like, it was fine as a one-off, a short film or a splatter film. I don't know what the interest is, how it got so strong to the point of making this big trilogy or convoluted universe and lore around it. I don't think Art the Clown lends himself to be all that compelling of a character outside of, the physical performance of the guy playing the mime. And the creativity of the kills. But when it came to Hellraiser, it's just, I like the production that goes into gore effects as far as learning how a certain effect was done or how a scene was done. And that's one of the things that interested me most about the original Nightmare on Elm Street, was learning how all the big moments, like the blood geyser room and Tina levitating out of her bed as she's being slashed to death in her dream, and her blood's going all over the room. That stuff is what gets me into these kinds of movies, because it just fascinates me how they think of that stuff, how they put it together, how they, especially before CGI was a resource, how they think, how are we going to pull this off, make it look the way we want it to look. And there's so many just moments in Hellraiser where I'm just like, holy crap, how did they do that? And it's like watching the behind-the-scenes stuff for it is just so cool. Like for the engineer, the stop motion with Frank, when he first regenerates and as a skeleton with just barely enough tissue on him to move it, from those few drops of blood to the bones to the brain, and then that last moment of him screaming, and like he's sucking in air for the first time since he's been trapped in hell. That is still, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, effect in the whole Hellraiser franchise. Is just for how much detail and how meticulous it was, is as they showed step by step of his body, reforming. It felt to me almost like a sort of inverse of American Werewolf in London's werewolf transformation, whereas with that scene, it's dragged out just as much, and you see them slowly adding the hair and the teeth and the bones and muscles stretching and changing, and they're adding stuff onto an actor to bring out this beast. But with Frank, with a Hellraiser, it feels like an inverse, because they're essentially making a body from nothing, so they're not adding on to an actor that already exists. It's that they're creating the illusion of something essentially from scratch. Yeah, but as far as the torture goes, I was interested in the philosophy behind it of pain and pleasure indivisible. Trying to find an experience that goes beyond the physical limits of what the human body can experience on the living plane. And the Cenobites, characterizing themselves as, we are explorers in the furthest regions of experience. They struck me as essentially two things. One, they're addicts in that they're addicted to, experiencing as much as they can, down to the most depraved stuff possible, with the whole S&M get-ups, and just how much they're willing to destroy their own bodies in addition to others, just self-mutilation. So they do come across as, you can interpret them as allegories for addiction, but they also strike me as these ethereal, you could describe them almost as angelic beings. They're not really alive or dead. They're somewhere in between. And the Cenobite dimension that they inhabit, I almost wouldn't even characterize it as hell. I'd describe it more as someplace in between heaven and hell. Love that song. But it feels like its own sort of dimension that people who have gone there may think is hell, or they perceive it to be, but it feels almost like it's its own place between time and space that is just so incomprehensible, just almost Lovecraftian. I think Clive Barker really plays to a Lovecraftian angle with with how this mythology works in the first few movies at least. And he really just builds it up as this thing that, this whole other plane that human beings just weren't meant to go. And the Cenobites being, beings that have gotten used to living there. they've lost so much of their humanity that it's like all they have left is the physical and emotional, just getting their rocks off, essentially, because they just don't know anything else. The human condition has been so drained out of them that I don't think they even understand what it means to be human anymore. Pinhead especially, until Christie restored his memories of what his human life was toward the end of Hellbound Hellraiser 2. So there's a real existentialism to the story that always made these characters in some ways more interesting to me compared to Freddy, Michael, Jason, or even Pennywise. He's who kind of borders on being an eldritch entity in his own right. Yeah, but I think what made the first two films so effective partially was, I said this, you're used to me saying this about Halloween. I said this about Species when I discussed that franchise with Caitlin on Plug It Up. I think ambiguity was this franchise's friend, and that, the less we knew about the Dimension and the Cenobites, the more memorable they were, because there was so much you could speculate on. Where did they come from? Who were they before they became these things? How exactly do their minds work compared to a normal human's? What the fuck was that bipedal worm thing that chased Christie in the alley? Which they never call the engineer by name in the film, by the way. But they do have a character in one of the later films who is called the engineer, and he's completely unrelated. He's just a guy. Yeah, but I like how there's so much they didn't explain. Where did the lament configuration come from? Why is it designed this way? Was it created by God or the devil? Did it just manifest into existence on its own? And I like how the first film especially leaves you on this note of having a taste of this world beyond the human realm, and Christie and her boyfriend just kind of got caught in the middle of it, and they barely saw 2% of it. It's like a diver who's explored 2% of the ocean, and after all this fucked up shit they went through, you realize, oh my god, we barely stepped 1 foot in the door to this whole other, plane of experience. And so what the hell else would have been waiting there if we'd gotten trapped there, or if we had gone with the Cenobites like Frank did? Did Hellbound, it added just enough to it to where I think the ambiguity was still maintained. It didn't explain too much. It still left you lingering just a little bit, wanting more. But from 3 onwards, it jumped the shark, gave the shark a jetpack, flew with the shark, did loop-de-loops with the shark around the moon, and then just did shark-shaped fireworks. It just completely threw any sense of subtlety or ambiguity or intrigue out of the water by the time we got to the 4th to 5th film. Yeah, I think that was a big ingredient to what made it special, and it's you drew the curtain behind the wizard, just showing everything down to the wizard's undergarments, and it's just it was too much. They gave away too much of the recipe.
I guess it could be devil's advocate. I'm going to kind of come with a rebuttal, since
go right ahead.
It's where I stand on backstories and horror and storytelling is it's a case by case basis. Halloween we differ quite dramatically, but Alien, the Xenomorphs, I kind of will say really quickly, as an example. With Prometheus, I think they kind of jumped the gun by... I know there's other... I don't know, I have yet to see kind of definitive evidence, but there's some fans of that franchise that claim that the Xenomorphs existed in that universe prior to the... Coincidentally, they were also called the space jockey or engineers themselves. That they... designed the Xenomorph to be a biological weapon, but there's some information out there that alleges the Xenomorph was already in existence at that time, and I guess they were experimenting with it. I don't know which is true, but either way, the main idea is I think Prometheus demystified the xenomorphs from Alien because it kind of goes into a backstory and explains that they were just created to be bioweapons. And I think that totally ruins their mystique from the first movie.
Yeah, well, it's very similar to Hellraiser in that regard, in that these creatures and these characters, to me, are just so much scarier and more fascinating when you don't know, everything about them down to their backstory, their blood type, who their mama was, who created them, why were they created, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, you don't need all of that. It's like so much of what makes Lovecraftian style characters like this scary to me is specifically because you can never truly know them. You can't comprehend everything about them. That their goals, their origins, so much about them is just beyond the capacity of lowly mortal understanding. And the deeper you dig trying to get to know them, the deeper you're going to go into the darkness. And if you're not careful, you might never be able to get out because the abyss is just going to swallow you up. It's like, that's part of what makes Cthulhu so fascinating, is like every protagonist in a Cthulhu story, without fail, they cross paths with him or somehow get involved with a cult that worships him. And it's like, this character doesn't know what they're in for. They're in way over their head. They typically kind of stumble onto all the supernatural stuff. And it's like, the deeper they go, the more their curiosity drives them to try to get to the truth of like, what is this? What is going on? And I'm going to solve this mystery. And then by the end, it's like that old motto of be careful what you wish for. Like, you think you want to know the truth, but it's worse than anything you could ever imagine. Like, worse than anything any writer could ever put to film. And I like that so many of these types of stories let your imagination kind of just stew on like with Event Horizon. We saw so little of hell in that movie. We only got a few glimpses of it, and so much of it we've talked about this before, I think, was cut out for censor reasons. And it's just like it makes it feel so much eerier to me, just letting you as the viewer, or kind of just go down the rabbit hole of your own imagination, and just like, how much didn't we see? Like, is there something worse than what we got with this monster or this antagonist? It's like, do I want to know? It makes the universe feel so much bigger, and the evil so much more powerful. But by the time we get to Hellraiser, 12 or 13, and it's like they've explained, everything fans have been asking, including questions they wouldn't even bother to ask about this lore, then it's like, well, the universe feels so much smaller now because you've basically taken away all the mystery that used to make it fun to think about. And what you gave us in some cases just honestly wasn't really that good of an idea, or it wasn't as well written as it could have been. Especially with the later sequels. It was like post Hellraiser Hell on Earth, or like by Hellraiser Deader, I think that's where it really starts. Like, you could tell that they were running out of steam with how to incorporate Pinhead, let alone the other characters. God, and poor Ashley Lawrence, like, she never had, I don't know how much of a career she even had beyond Hellraiser, because she was only in like 3 of those films, and I don't really know her from anything else outside of that.
I think what 2 does is it kind of sort of takes too much away from the mystique of the Cenobites, if I can say that, because from my opinion, you find out that they were once human. I think that decision right there kind of ruins it for me, if I'm being honest. Because
I can see that. I agree with that.
Yeah, from my perspective. And I know part 3 expands more on Elliot Spencer, which was the human version of Pinhead before he became Pinhead. That he was basically a British officer in World War I, and after the horrors of World War I that he experienced in the trenches, and in the war itself, he was stationed in India. Obviously, I thought that from a historical parallel that was very good storytelling, because the British did occupy India during that time before they later left India after World War II. But he grows disenchanted, he discovers the box, and boom, But the thing is, though, why was he spared from not suffering the horrors of hell, and he was made into a Cenobite? Why did they only select certain people? That's another thing that, I mean, not that it needs an explanation, but I found that to be, I don't want to say a plot hole, but just a mystery. Okay, anybody else who opens the box, they're going to be tortured for all eternity, but yet some people who opened the box were turned into Cenobites. Well, why? That's a question I have. I'm just curious. Why?
Why?
Just don't think about it.
He was one of the lucky ones, apparently.
Only the box knows.
Clive Barker. He knows.
Yeah, the box is Clive Barker. The box is the writers. There's just doing whatever the writers decide to do, and the box is just the vehicle through which it happens. The lament configuration is to Hellraiser what the Force is to Star Wars. It does whatever the plot demands, apparently. And that worked to its advantage in the first couple films, because I like how they characterize the box as this mysterious object of unexplained, or at least not completely explained origin. You know, Frank knew very little about it. He was able to track it down somehow, and I like how they showed very little of his search for it, you know, as far as what clues he was following or who told him about it, you know, who is the old Asian guy who, like, held it for him. And why is he, like, selling this thing off to people? Does he know what it's going to do? You know, has he opened the box before himself? Is he a Cenobite in disguise? Because we do see in some of the later films, like, the Cenobites can somehow shapeshift or pose as normal humans, or as friends and loved ones that the main characters know. How do they do that? Fuck knows. It was I guess all their power just comes from the box, and again, the box is a giant plot device / MacGuffin, and it's the cause of all the problems and the solution at the same time. But it was very mysterious in the first couple films, because it seemed almost like this. I keep overusing the word Lovecraftian, but it really felt like this sacred sort of relic from another dimension or another era, something that wasn't made by human hands. Yeah. And so, you know, maybe aliens built it. Maybe the aliens discovered the Cenobites at some point. I mean, you know, if the studios had gone for it, they would have brought Hellraiser, they would have brought alien Cenobites into Hellraiser. Like, the box has affected other planets. It's like, they brought Penny into space. They already did it.
Don't even try to tie that to the alien universe, because Fox holds the rights.
They went the Jason X route. They already went the Jason X route with Pinhead, just bringing him onto a spaceship. So, I mean, if the studios had gone for it, you know they would have introduced extraterrestrial Cenobites. Wouldn't have to be xenomorphs, but
no.
Oh, that would have been so funny.
No, I think okay,
Cenobite Martians.
Oh, man, I can't even respond to that. I'm gonna say, okay.
Oh my God! Wait! I just thought of this. Have you ever seen Galaxy Quest?
Yeah, I have.
Hang on. One sec. I always forget this guy's name. I gotta double check it. Yeah, real quick. Because this would have been a perfect Enrico Colantoni, Mathazar. Can you imagine, like, a parody or a YouTube edit of someone editing Mathazar's head onto Pinhead's body and like you edit the nails coming out of him, and he's just like, "You open the box, Christy. Now we have come from the fifth dimension of pain and pleasure, and we're ripping your tits open." Oh my god, someone who is a better editor than me, please, God, make that happen. And Mathazar as a Cenobite would have been fucking hilarious, and he already has the pale skin for it. Like, you just stick him in an S&M getup, but, maybe shove a nail through his skull, and he's perfect. That's a gift wrapped for a perfect Hellraiser parody. Oh my god, I would love to see that so much now. That's all I can think about now.
Well, well, why not? I mean, some of these other properties have gone downhill with their wild ideas. Jurassic World Rebirth, I'm looking at you. I'm not going to say much about it. I'm not going to say. All I'm going to say is.
Embrace the madness, man. This is clown. No. Let's just have fun with it.
No.
Which film would you say would have been the best place to end the story? I mean, you know how I feel about that. Like, I think the best stopping point would have been Hellraiser 2.
Yeah.
If you had to do a sequel at all. But what would you have picked? Would you have left it at just the original?
Yeah, and it's a shame because Kevin Yeager, it's kind of like a Dimension Films, yet again, Miramax. They also fucked up Halloween 6, but we won't go there for this recording. They also interfered with Hellraiser 4, because Kevin Yeager, who was infamous for making the Chucky doll animatronic for the original Child's Play directed by Don Mancini, he originally was in charge of directing Hellraiser 4. And then Peter Atkins, who originally was the screenwriter for Hellraiser 4 Bloodline, they had a whole different idea for the movie. They wanted to explore 1700s Paris, to explore the origins of the toy maker who created the puzzle box. I know that you think demystifies it. I mean, yeah, I can see arguments to be made for that. I mean, maybe if you were to ask me, I think it probably would have been a better idea if the puzzle box had been forged in hell by Satan himself. That probably would have been a great backstory for it.
By the grand blacksmith of Lucifer himself.
Yeah. He had a Sauron moment. He had a Sauron moment, like Lord of the Rings forging in Mount Doom.
Yeah. And anyone listening, if you understand that reference, you passed my test and we can be friends.
Other podcasts are Hellraiser-centric and focused. There's plenty out there. There's the Clive Barker podcast. For anybody, I guess, that's interested, once they listen, if they listen to this episode, they can refer to it. They go so much more into detail about the troubled production of Hellraiser 4 Bloodline. They've actually interviewed Peter Atkins, who was a screenwriter. He's talked about it a couple times on their show. But basically, the Weinsteins axed Kevin Yeager, so they replaced him with a different director, and that's where he came with the theatrical version of Hellraiser 4 Bloodline.
Big fucking surprise. Weinstein again.
Yeah.
That name just keeps coming up in Hollywood horror stories, doesn't it?
I would want to say Hellraiser 3 would be where I would want to end it, but I don't think I would want to go there because they kind of... I mean, okay, I'll kind of say I understand. Okay, it was interesting. Okay, apparently because this kind of makes sense to me, I guess, when you think about it, that at the end of 2, when Pinhead is killed by the Cenobite Cenobite by Dr. Chennard, that his human self is detached from his Pinhead self. So there, without both of those personalities, or both, I guess, personas together, it leaves open Pinhead as just pure evil. He doesn't have the other part to balance him out. But so that takes away the lawful neutralness of him, right? But the problem is if he's supposed to be the high priest of hell, or Leviathan, or whoever's bounding him to the sacred law, where the hell were they during the events of Hellraiser 3? They didn't say, hey, this guy is over there acting rogue. He wants to open up a pathway to hell forever. And they did that in Hellraiser 4, too. They kind of mischaracterized Pinhead, too, because it is revealed that in 4, he wanted to open a pathway to hell forever. Are you kidding me? Okay, so this goes from the guy, we're only going to take somebody who opens the box, to, we want to unleash hell upon the whole world for people that didn't even open the box. No. That is a mischaracterization. They fucked up there, starting with 3 by saying, okay, he's going to become the supervillain. He's just going to want to just kill everybody, like in that boiler room in New York City.
I am the way. Admittedly, as much as that film ruins Pinhead's character, makes him into a more generic slasher villain,
He becomes a slasher.
As much as I don't like where the story took him from then onward, I do still enjoy Doug Bradley, because he is just like chewing scenery in that movie. That was the last entry in the franchise that really gave him some material to chew on, because like for the remainder of the series, like anytime he appears in, I think he appeared as Pinhead up until the 7th Hellraiser film. It was either the 7th one or the 8th one, I think, Hellraiser Judgment. I get the order, I get the release order of these mixed up so much. Like there's Hellraiser, then Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, 4, Bloodlines. Means then I think there's Hellseeker, which is the one where Ashley Lawrence comes back, but it's different from the original canon of Christie's character, so technically it's the same actor playing another version of Christie. Then you get to Hellraiser Deader, then I think Judgment, and then you have the 2018 Hellraiser where it's like a female Pinhead now, and some fans speculated that female Pinhead was actually Christie, like yet another version of her from a continuity where she actually became a Cenobite, like she ended up going with them in the end after all. Well, maybe sometime after the events of Hellraiser 2. But they never confirmed that, it's just a theory. But every time Pinhead appears after the 3rd film, he's just kind of there. And from what I understand from the retrospectives I've watched on this series, one of the most common criticisms of the later films is that people saying it doesn't feel like a Hellraiser movie, it feels like a totally different movie, that Hellraiser characters like Pinhead were just slapped onto later on in development. And apparently the reason why so many of the later sequels feel like that is because that's literally what they were. Like, they were films that weren't originally supposed to be Hellraiser movies, and the scripts apparently just got reconfigured to allow for Hellraiser plot lines to be mashed into it. Like you know why so many of the sequels are basically cop dramas with the protagonist investigating cases that relate to the Cenobites and the box, and they just kind of get drawn in, and by coincidence, or because they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, because most of those movies were written to be cop dramas first, and they literally just threw Pinhead in there somehow. I mean, you know, hats off to Doug Bradley for coming back to so many of these. He's, despite how he had increasingly less and less to do as the scripts went on. And I don't blame him for bowing out of the series by Judgment. And it's like, hell, I wouldn't have stuck around at that point either, because there was just, it was so clear that they had no idea what they wanted this series to be. They couldn't agree on what the lore was anymore. Or Pinhead was literally just there to be, recognizable marketing material. He flings a few chains, skins a few people alive, and then he just dips out of there. And people keep coming up with these, increasingly creatively lazy ways to defeat him, where it's just like, they're rehashing things that were already done to him in the first 2 films. It's like, oh, do something with the box that defeats him, or oh, turn him human again and he loses his powers. So now he can't be a Cenobite anymore. It's like they did different flavors of those same 2 methods to beat him at least 3 or 4 different times in the sequels, and eventually it just gets to the point. It's like with Michael Myers. You and I may disagree on the Cult of Thorn trilogy. At the very least, that trilogy added something. Like, it tried to do something different with Michael Myers. But the later Hellraiser films, it's just... I don't get... I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in those creative meetings. It's like, okay, people, this is Hellraiser 7, Hell on Earth again. What are we doing this time? Really? He's back again? And, like, hasn't he been killed, like, 5 different times now? Wouldn't he have a hard time coming back for like the 8th time at this point? Actually, it'll be easy, barely an inconvenience. I'm channeling the Screen Junkies to like pitch meeting videos a little bit there, but it's just that's how it feels. It's like every single pitch meeting, they must have come up with just the laziest excuses for how to keep bringing this guy back. He's almost like Michael Myers in terms of being like the Bowser of slasher villains. And it's like no matter how many times you get rid of him, he always seems to find a way to come back, to the point that eventually it's just like, why are you even here? That was a big one right there, introducing additional boxes. Like
they did that in 2. Because
I don't
Chenard
like
in the hospital ward, because
I don't like when 2 did it either. I hate when horror stories do that. They take a sacred, one-of-a-kind object or device that had such significant meaning, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, oh, here's more of them. It's like, they did the same thing with the Evil Dead films, like Army of Darkness. They have Ash go to get the Book of the Dead back from its gravesite, so they can use the spell in there to send him back to his own time. And they get to that scene in the graveyard where he's just like, wait a minute, nobody said anything about 3 books. And it's left up to interpretation, like, are they all different Necronomicons? Are 2 of them fake? Does he only need the specific one because that's the one with the right spell in it that he needs? It's like, and then in the 2013 Evil Dead, it's a remake, but it's not a remake. It's a different book, but it does basically all the same shit as the first book. And now there's so many different books now. It's like an encyclopedia of the dead.
Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow.
And you're just like, that takes so much away from what made that thing so powerful and special and sinister in the original film. And then what's worse, Ash vs. Evil Dead, they go the extra fucking mile of revealing who wrote the damn thing. And you actually reveal the Necronomicon's author, and it turns out this whole time, oh wow, such a big reveal, it was Lucy Lawless. Yeah, fucking Xena wrote the Necronomicon, and this thing that's bound in human flesh, inked in blood, thousands of years old, ancient Sumerian demon summoning text, and you're telling me this whole time, the monster who wrote that incredibly, incomprehensibly evil power source was just Lucy Lawless? Fuck you. I like Bruce Campbell. I always like him. Fuck the Evil Dead franchise for what they did to the Necronomicon's lore. Or fuck it every which way from Sunday, plus an extra day for shits and giggles.
See, I think what it is a lot of these studios, screenwriters, they don't really give a damn about storytelling and details and exposition, because they retcon so much stuff. They also make poor choices by adding information or backstories that do make no fucking sense, or ruins the trajectory of the characters by having it be very underwhelming or totally demystifying them, if you want to go that route. No, like, they fucked up with Hellraiser 2 with too many puzzle boxes, because that's how I feel about multiverses, that it takes away from the originality of a character if there's different versions of them in different universes. That, for me, kind of ruins it for me.
With Hellraiser, it's just like, how much of this story did we really need to know? I mean, how much lore do you need? They gave us, like, all the building blocks we needed in the first film. It was cool to see the Cenobite dimension in the second film. You know, I wasn't against that. You know, the Dr. Chenard Cenobite, you know, they went kind of more of a mechanical route with him, with that tentacle, fueling power into him, and like the adrenochrome just pumping into his brain. Like that I thought was kind of cool.
You know, another issue I have with that one is Leviathan's reasoning of, okay, for some reason, I'm going to have multiple boxes be open because I'm going to control this fucker. This guy that's a doctor that fell into a trap because of Julia. Came a Cenobite, and once Pinhead and his cohort remembered they were human, Leviathan were just like, okay, we're going to have to, I'm going to have to fuck up these people because they figured out they were human, and instead of trying to just brainwash them because I'm Leviathan, I'm their boss, I'm just going to go ahead and just kill them by ordering Chenard to do so. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because why the fuck are you going to replace your lead Cenobite, which was Pinhead, with this guy that seemed to have his own ulterior motives? He seemed to have had his ulterior motives, and I don't think Leviathan was going to go for that. So, I mean, I think that's why eventually he ends up killing Chenard, because he realized that I think he wasn't going to go with the program. That you gotta do it.
It's the Cenobite who knew too much.
It ruins it so much. Like, Pinhead wants to open up a pathway to hell in Hellraiser 4. Like I said, he wants for the link between hell and earth to be kept open forever. And that doesn't so that only implies that, okay, that what happened at the end of 3 when Pinhead was finally joined up with his human self, Elliot Spencer, that Pinhead still had this idea, okay, I'm just going to want to just rule the world, just have it suffer forever. Fuck the rules, fuck the fact that I was supposed to follow this code when I first started here. I'm still going to do my own thing. No. It's still implying that he's still doing his own thing. He's not following this code that he was originally supposed to follow from the first movie. Like, how the fuck do you still explain that?
Fuck Super Saiyans, fuck power levels, and fuck you!
No, and then it ruins it so much. Like, Pinhead wants to open up a pathway to hell in Hellraiser 4. Like I said, he wants for the link between hell and earth to be kept open forever. And that doesn't so that only implies that, okay, that what happened at the end of 3 when Pinhead was finally joined up with his human self, Elliot Spencer, that Pinhead still had this idea, okay, I'm just going to want to just rule the world, just have it suffer forever. Fuck the rules, fuck the fact that I was supposed to follow this code when I first started here. I'm still going to do my own thing. No. It's still implying that he's still doing his own thing. He's not following this code that he was originally supposed to follow from the first movie. Fuck Kevin Yeager. No disrespect to him, but I'm saying that's what they told him, essentially. F you and your vision, and Peter Atkins' vision. We're just going to go ahead. We're the Weinsteins. We're the ones that are fucking things up by messing up storytelling of 2 iconic characters, Michael Myers and Pinhead. We're just going to do what we want because we're paying the bills here. And so we're just going to tell you, just up the gore, up the blood. That's all we care about. We don't care about storytelling. We don't care about continuity. We don't care about any details. We just want more blood, guts, splattering.
You've seen the Lament configuration. This is the Anarchy configuration. This is the anti-configuration.
The space station in 4 that was supposed to be a big giant Lament configuration. That's supposed to. Wait, it looked
like the board ship from Star Trek.
No, you're telling me that Pinhead, who's essentially a demon from hell, was destroyed by some mechanical device created by some human being? Like for some reason that worked by using light or whatever the hell it used to destroy him in hell forever. No. How the fuck does that happen? There's no way. Unless the Le Marchand ancestry or family lineage was descended from God or Jesus Christ himself, they had some kind of divine influence there, I can understand, okay, that's how it happened because God intervened, if we're going that route. The Christianity explanation.
So a French ancestor set this chain of events in motion. Like a French ancestor not only built the box, but also gave his distant descendant the means to allegedly stop the Cenobites once and for all, or at least Pinhead,
and stop hell from doing its thing.
I kick ass for the Lord.
This is exactly what we as privileged Americans need to remember, Alfonso, is that we need to remember the French are our friends. And so when it really counts, when the chips are down, the French come through.
So the fact that this guy, Le Marchand, was originally duped by this wealthy French aristocrat, Delisle, or I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't speak French, so please pardon me for that pronunciation. This guy that had this ulterior motive of using him to open... No, that's another thing. That's another problematic origin story for the puzzle box. That you're telling me that this guy, Delisle, that this French aristocrat that was messing with the dark arts, he wanted this puzzle box for some reason to bring a demon from hell to be his sex slave, essentially, like because he wanted to possess the body of a woman, Angelique. And that's the origin of the puzzle box to hell? Are you freaking kidding me? Just because some guy wanted to get his rocks off, so to speak, by having a demon sex slave? That is a problematical origin story if I ever heard one. More so than any other. I'm sorry. Are you kidding me?
Alfonso, what we as privileged Americans have to remember is that every once in a while, the French, who are historically famous for their kinkiness, one of them, every once in a while, just gets a little too kinky for their own good.
Kiss me, my dear, and I will reveal my croissant. I will spread your pâté. I will dip my ladle in your vicious one.
Love the French. Statue of Liberty, beautiful. We're eternally grateful to everything the French have given us, from the fries that actually originate from Belgium to the French horror films that have given us some of the most iconic scenes in horror cinema history. Hey, looking at you, High Tension. But every once in a while, we have to look our French brothers and sisters in the eye and just tell them, you need to calm the fuck down and just go on Tinder like the rest of us. You do not need to build this eldritch abomination of an invention in a sort of miniature puzzle box portal to literal hell, all because you have that much trouble getting your dick wet. Like, at a certain point, buddy, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth it?
Apparently, it was for that French aristocrat who used Le Marchand's box to do just that. He really wanted to get his rocks off, so to speak. So he decided, hey, let me get this insatiable demon from hell to possess the body of this beautiful woman, and she'll be my sex slave forever. And
I mean, there are other ways. You do realize there are other ways to summon a succubus, right? Hey, like, you didn't have to go through all this trouble. There are so many
You didn't have to summon a demon from hell.
We don't kink shame on this podcast, usually. But at a certain point, you got to think about how your bullshit is going to affect other people. It's like what you do in the privacy of your own home with your super freak demon ladies. That is your right. It's your prerogative.
We'll tear your ass apart.
But can you leave the rest of the world out of it?
Exactly. Like, Delisle, I'm sorry, man. Like, you try to come back in the fourth quarter as the overarching antagonist of the series. You're trying to pull a Dr. Wynn when you weren't even seen in the original movie of Hellraiser by Clive Barker, and saying, hey, I'm the one that's responsible for all this because I wanted to get off to this. I wanted to have a sex slave demon. who would do my bidding for all eternity. Fuck the rules, and also ignoring the rules that the demon put in place. That basically, if you do not interfere with Hell's way, we'll get along just fine. But if you do interfere with Hell's way, I'm killing you. That didn't raise alarm bells for Delisle's apprentice, accomplice, who later was the one that was with Angelique, and that when the present day, the modern day flashbacks of them in Paris, centuries later, when he realizes he refuses to let her go to the United States to visit one of the descendant of Le Marchand in New York City, he stood in Hell's way, and so he had to be eliminated. You didn't really think that the consequences were going to come to your doorstep by messing with Hell just because you were turned immortal, just like what Lestat in Queen of the Damned? That's what it seemed like. Like, how else you became a vampire, essentially, that you threw in your lot with? And they never explained that either. Like, how did this guy, that I forgot the actor who plays him, I know he was in the 2015 Krampus, but he played Delisle's apprentice. His person, let me see if I can find his name really quick.
And he's 2015's Krampus, you said?
Yeah, he is Adam Scott. Yes, he's the one that plays Delisle's apprentice.
I completely forgot that Adam Scott was in one of these sequels. He was a kid back then. That's the youngest I've ever seen him.
And you mean to tell me that he turns into some vampire for centuries because he decided to throw his lot in with Hell and be like, hey, I get to live forever, right? As long as I don't fuck over Hell. But then when I tell you no, that I'm standing in Hell's way, I'm going to get fucked up. That sounds good to me. And then later he pays the price for it. No. And then another issue is, before Pinhead meets Angelique for the first time, when she summons him, she is not mutilated in any way like the Cenobites are. So if she's a demon from Hell, did they have certain rules, like I guess like in 1700s Hell, that they're like, okay, we're not mutilating demons yet. Where did I guess that king came after Delisle, right? Like, wow, we look at kink shame, not to kink shame, but like, well, look at these chains, huh? Maybe we can do something with these chains. And we gotta mutilate the bodies of the demons in Hell because we gotta maybe do something here. No, like, how the fuck did you fucking explain that before the puzzle box was created? Are you telling me that there were no Cenobites that were mutilated in any shape or form? Then they don't explain that. Like, I think probably that was better not to have been explained. Like, how did Hell end up deciding? Okay, we need to just have demons in his leather chains and the whole shebang. Got to have mutilated piercings on their bodies.
It was the 80s, okay? It was the peak of punk culture.
So you're saying that Pinhead was a rock icon?
And hey, look at the album covers for countless rock bands, and especially and metal bands. Tell me Pinhead wouldn't fit right in on so many of those pictures. I'm just saying. And maybe Clive Barker went through a punk phase at some point in his youth.
Yeah, I can just see Pinhead just
shredding on that guitar and like just chains dancing everywhere.
Well, it's better than that Cinnabon skit of him working at a Cinnabon in a mall. I think I've showed you before.
Somewhere out there is a Cenobite cosplay rock band. I just know it. I'll tell you one thing that never made any sense to me, and I think the sequels did this. I don't think this was in the original. In one of the films, I think this is after the second film, there's a part where Pinhead says, "It is not hands that call us, it is desire." And it's like, so you're telling me you don't even have to know how to solve the puzzle box? You're implying that if you desire for it to open, it'll just open, or it'll just magically guide your hand? And it's like some of the scenes with this puzzle box has never been consistent in terms of its difficulty. Even in the first film, it's like some of these characters in these films, they seem to take hours upon hours figuring it out, like the world's hardest Rubik's Cube. Whereas Christy, if you actually watch her hand movements, fiddling around with the prop of the lament configuration, she barely has to mess with the thing before it opens. So are you implying that if you desire for it to open, even out of just pure curiosity, you don't even have to want the mutilation or the Cenobites, any of that? If the box just senses you thinking being open, then all of a sudden it's open sesame? If that's the case, then just curious, quick little question here for the writers. Here's no disrespect, a big fan, but then why the fuck make it a puzzle box in the first place? If all you need to open the fucking thing is the desire to have it open, then what is the point of designing it as a puzzle, testing if you can open it? That makes no friggin' sense. That is antithetical to the whole purpose of making something a puzzle. If you can just will it to open, if it can just sense your emotions, like sense that you want it to open, and it'll just react to that automatically, then what was the point of all the time and thought put into, crafting the damn thing? Like what? You may as well just make it rubbing a genie's lamp at that point.
You ain't never had a friend like me.
Might as well just have Darth Vader come in for a crossover, open the puzzle box, meet Pinhead, and just tell him. Pinhead looks at him up and down and knows his story. Huh. So, you got your limbs cut off in a field of lava in a volcanic planet? Sweet. So hell's gonna be a breeze for you, man. Except, it's gonna be very hot. But that's gonna remind you of Mustafar, right?
Unbelievable. Unapologetic. Did not even bother to do your research on the source material levels.
They're gonna bring Darth Vader
just
into it.
Unadulterated bullshit. You take away any reason for this damn thing to even be a puzzle box. Like now, with one line from Pinhead, you have essentially reduced the entire mythology of this thing to, oh, another human's trying to open me. Ooh, I just like the feel of their fingers. It trips, it really tickles me. Look, they're trying so hard to figure me out. Isn't that a gas? Okay, I'll just magically open now. It's one of the most compelling puzzle objects in all of horror, and you reduce the whole thing down to, oh, you just have to have the desire. Or, like, a fucking amputee with no fingers could open the puzzle box as long as they just want it to.
It doesn't matter that there's desire because they don't care about that. As long as if the puzzle box opens, they're not going to stop and ask, wait, do you have desire to actually go to hell? Because you do even know what this thing is? Because if you don't, why are we going to take you to hell? Because you have no idea what the fuck this is. So we're not taking you to hell.
To be fair, Christy didn't know what it was the first time she opened it either. Like she said straight up, she didn't mean to open it. She didn't know what it was.
But see, doesn't that then contradict what Pinhead says in part 2 then? That it is not the hands that call us, but desire. So that's a contradiction then, because if she didn't know what she was doing and she didn't mean to open it, why was he willing to take her? That seems to already be breaking his rules. That she didn't even know what she was doing. So how does Clive Barker explain that in the original film? We're asking you, Clive.
Apparently.
That's a problem from the outset.
It's so stupid. And then the later films, like, it doesn't even matter if you open the box. It doesn't matter if you even touch the box. Like, by Hellraiser Judgment, Pinhead's killing off characters who didn't have anything to do with the box at all. Like, if you're just in the same vicinity as him, like in the same room when he appears, then you can potentially get killed. Just don't think about it.
Dude, Hellraiser Judgment's Pinhead, he is so bold enough to think that he can win in a war against heaven, that he's willing to say, oh, I'm going to tear an angel apart, an archangel apart, and there's not going to be no consequences for me, is there? Because I am a demon, and I am in hell already, so what is God going to do to spite me? Well, what he's going to do is he's going to torture you by bringing you back to Earth as a human to suffer forever. I guess that was with the implication of the ending of Judgment when Pinhead's brought back to the real world
so
as a homeless person.
You take a British guy who lived during World War I and you just plop him into a modern day city. His accent's not the same anymore. His pins are all gone, and somehow he's just like, forget being human. He's going to be freaked out because now he's in a completely different decade, almost a different century from the world he knew. It's like, that is so far after World War I. It's like he's not going to know what hardly anything is. Is it like he's not going to know how to work a television? Yeah, can you imagine?
Yeah,
that?
Yeah, but it's supposed to it's supposed to punish him though for some reason, that he's supposed to spend eternity on Earth as a whole.
Yeah, and imagine that's his punishment, is for the rest of his life he's just trying to figure out modern technology and he cannot work a damn thing to save his life. Imagine a guy who was an adult during World War I and having to figure out with no understanding of IT tech support or how to work a laptop.
What the hell is even that?
That's another thing too. Like, you're gonna punish a guy that was later turned to a demon in hell, that you think that this is going to punish him by just sending him to the present day as a homeless person on the streets of Los Angeles or wherever the hell that was. That's going to be far worse than what he's experienced already. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's the best you could come up with? I want to understand a different punishment as an ending. That he forever would have been trapped inside a puzzle box forever, like the Jinn and Wishmaster. That would have been maybe a punishment for him. A better punishment. He would have been forever trapped, never to be seen or heard from again. I don't know, but that would have been a better idea than what they did at the end of Judgment.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, you should watch the Rick and Morty episode where they parody Hellraiser, because they do so many jokes with the Cenobites that actually make you think about the movies. And it's like they go into the logistics of, well, what do they consider pleasure? What do they consider pain? How do you distinguish what you like from what you dislike if there's no difference between the two anymore? So it's like if you stab Pinhead through the heart, does he not like that, or does he like cream his pants or something? Like, what sensations does he enjoy and not enjoy? What would a demon actually not take pleasure from, if any sort of sensation or stimulation and potentially contributes to an experience they're looking for? Or it's like, at that point, short of sealing them away, like, you doing some bullshit with the box to send them back to their own dimension, there shouldn't be much of anything you can do to really affect them negatively if part of their lore is that they enjoy pain or they enjoy suffering. I don't know. It's a bit of a paradox there when you think about it from a psychological standpoint. Just that episode of Rick and Morty goes more in depth with it than I could. But I just thought that was one of the more clever parodies they did in terms of kind of exploring what it's like to be a Cenobite, and how there's sort of an inherent contradiction there existentially. If you no longer understand any distinction between positive and negative stimulation. Just don't think.
All right, I get it!
I gotta bring this up. MC Escher, that's who I was talking about. The painter known for the stairways that go to nowhere. I liked that they worked that aesthetic into the hell dimension in Hellraiser 2. Like, if you had to pick a design for what a Cenobite dimension could look like, trying to make it into this sort of endless liminal space, MC Escher was definitely a good choice to draw inspiration from. And because that would drive anyone mad, just from a perception of reality standpoint. I think just a perception of space, like, that would fuck you up all kinds of ways. But one thing I gotta bring up before I forget, is there's a very common theme in this series, and I don't know if this is on purpose or just for nostalgia's sake, but somehow one thing that keeps working its way into Hellraiser stories is infidelity. It sort of ties into the sort of religious themes, almost like a Catholic guilt sort of thing with the original film, where Julia is like looking at a statue of an angel on the house's stairwell or something. She's like walking up the stairs, she looks at an angel statue or a crucifix or something, and you see her look at it with this like anger on her face, but also this little twinge of guilt. Little to it like God knows what she did, even before she got involved with, committing murder. It's like, you could interpret it as she's a sinner who, betrayed her husband, and that already kind of makes her a villain in a sense. There's a lot of, especially in the early films that for not being a straight up demon character, demons to some, angels to others, there's as ambiguous as the Cenobites are. The story itself, especially in the first Hellraiser, has some very overt religious commentary in it on like, characterizing infidelity as an evil and those who commit it as the main antagonists of the story, much more so than the Cenobites. So, like Frank and Julia are the true villains of the first two Hellraisers. I would argue more so than any of the Cenobites, including Dr. Gerhart. But it's just interesting to me how that seems to work its way back so many times into the later films, where there always seems to be a relationship betrayal of some kind, and the characters behind it end up getting their just desserts from it, in some form. Including in Judgment, where you have those two characters, Pinhead's just like, your meager infidelity is beneath me, and then just whoop, chains just come out and yank the both of them right into hell. Well, even though if my memory's right, they never even touched the box, but it's like, oh, well, they're still cheaters though, so, fuck them. I mean, you're going to hell with the rest of them because fuck you, cheating is wrong, that's why. And it's like, in the story of the first film, at a certain point, I'm thinking to myself, why is Julia even with Larry? It's like, is she like a sugar mama or something? Like, if you hate this guy so much and you miss Frank so much, why didn't you just leave Larry to be with him? I mean, Frank, he's a sensation addict, so he's like, oh, it's never enough after he sleeps with Julia, so he leaves her. Why didn't she just run off with them? Why stay with Larry when you clearly, detest him or are disgusted so much by him? She doesn't give a damn about Christy. She's an evil stepmother archetype to a T. So that's one thing the story in the first film could have given a little more depth on, is like, why are these characters even together? Like, why are they married? I don't know. That's just one little detail that always kind of stuck out as a nitpick to me. It's like, you love Frank enough that you're willing to kill people, including your own husband, to be with him again. But it's just like, why is Larry even here? Because his sole purpose in the first film is to essentially be cocked by his brother, and then killed off by his brother and his wife horribly, I might add. His skin is stolen, and poor Christy has to go through the trauma of her potentially incestuous molester uncle, stealing her dad's skin. The way he acts around her, just the creepy vibe he gives off, it's highly implied that he may have touched her inappropriately or had inappropriate feelings for her, especially in the second film when he's like, Christy, you're so luscious in your fear. And I'm just like, this is a completely different kind of gross from what we've been shown up to this point. And, he went a little Freddy Krueger there with Christy, and it's just like,
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
I just don't get some of the logic behind it. Poor Larry, man. He got the shit end of the stick every way possible in these movies. He's just like, well, golly gee willikers, honey, I sure do love my wife, and I love my daughter. Holy shit, now you're ripping my skin off? Oh my gosh, the things you kids are into today. It's just, he's like the Ned Flanders of Hellraiser. He's such a comically pure, innocent, good guy, and he just gets one of the most horrific ways to go out in these movies.
You know what's another issue with his death? He had nothing to do with opening the box. He had nothing to do with that. And yet it's revealed in the later installments where Christy comes back, Hellraiser Hellseeker, that you're meaning to tell me that her father has been in hell for so many years. Why?
'Cause fuck 'em, that's why.
He was a victim of a murder. He was killed.
He was a good, doting husband, a loving father. He, as far as I can tell, he never said or did one negative thing to anyone. He was estranged from his brother, but that's because his brother was an asshole. Like, he was a troublemaker. He chose to not be a part of Larry's family. So it's just like, I mean, it comes off almost like mean-spirited, just like the amount of shit that he gets in the end, and they just never, I don't think they ever resolve it. Even in Hellraiser 2, like, did they show his soul being saved by Christy in the end?
You know another thing?
I forget.
I can't even, I don't think so, but I was just going to say, another issue is, I don't think that's on brand for Pinhead from the original movie. Why does he, because by the time Hellseeker comes around, he's still stuck on getting Christy. Why do you care about this one girl who has one soul to give? Out of how many people on the planet at any given time, billions of people, what is so special about her that you were still holding on to this obsession with her 20-some years later?
It's the Cenobite's ego. They don't like being cheated.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, there's a big plot hole, because if it is revealed that whoever gets taken by the box, if blood is spilled at the site where they were taken, that is a big loophole, because shouldn't the Cenobites be aware of that hey, maybe one day they're going to be able to get out of here, because if people figure out you have to drop blood where the site where we took these people, they're going to be able to come back to Earth. That is a major loophole. How did they never addressed of how to deal with that,
and for
how
that
to rectify
matter,
that.
Like, correct me if I'm forgetting something, why didn't Christy ever try that to bring back Larry? It's like, if she wanted her father back that badly, I don't know. I mean, if she dropped a little bit of her blood at the spot where he was killed, I don't.
By Frank.
I guess. I mean, does it count if you're killed by a human? Does it have to be? Do you have to be killed by a Cenobite specifically?
Wait, but
I don't know.
Doesn't that imply that Julia was killed by the box because she apparently, for some odd reason, opened it, because she was on the bed near the end of the original movie, and there was chains for some reason on her body. So that doesn't really no, but that doesn't really make sense either. That you're telling me that it always seemed like Pinhead had this obsession with Christy, that out of billions of people on the planet, so many souls to get. Yeah, I just don't think that's a lousy explanation that they didn't like being cheated. Yeah, just one person. So what? Out of what? Out of millions and millions of people who went to hell. Out of billions.
They're so obsessed because Pinhead is just that petty.
That he's still on it 20 years later by the time Hellseeker comes around. I don't think so. Like, you know what would have been crazy is if in Hellraiser 3 or in Hellraiser 3, if they would have had him be on a vendetta against Christy and looking for her as the plot for 3, that would have just been too much for me, more than what they did in 3. That he would have been obsessed with finding her. I mean, granted, that probably would have been an interesting movie. That he was so obsessed with her that he was going to search for her all over the world, And apparently in the novel Hellraiser, The Toll, it's a book by Clive Barker, kind of explores that concept of Pinhead meeting Christie again years later after the events of the original book, that he hasn't forgotten, that he's still after her, he still wants her. Yeah, but why? Like just because she escaped you, well, so what? Like, she made a deal to get out of hell for you. Like, she gave you back Frank, and you reneged on your end of the bargain. So you are an honest Cenobite yourself. I mean, if they're a lawful evil, another mischaracterization is, why would they renege on a deal that was made? He got Frank back. She was telling the truth. You follow these rules, and plus she didn't even know what the box was. She had no desire to go to hell. So why would he want to take her? Like, there's no reason for him to have taken her. Unless they could have explained it some other way, some backstory of why she was important, but then that would have took the franchise in a whole different direction if they would explain that. That she
It's
was
like,
some...
I like Ashley Lawrence. I don't think she's a bad actor. I just never considered Christie to be that memorable of a final girl. It's like she was kind of milquetoast to me in the first film. You know, you could replace her with literally any other girl who happens to be related to Frank and Larry, and I don't think the plot would have been affected that much. It's just this is sort of like, there's going to be a range of different opinions on this. You know, some fans may not agree with me. There's a spectrum of what we consider to be the best acting versus the worst acting when it comes to final survivors in horror. Or, you know, a lot of people put Jamie Lee Curtis as the gold standard for Laurie Strode. Yeah. Then you got Sydney... Nev Campbell, Sidney Prescott in Scream. That you got Heather Langenkamp, Nancy Thompson in Elm Street. Christy Cotton is an interesting case because her character does get more interesting, in my opinion, as the series goes on. When they put more meat on her character with all the shit she goes through. But in the first movie, I don't know what it is. I never got that much out of her performance. Again, it's not that she was bad. She just didn't have a lot to work with. She's kind of just there to be the Cenobite's unwitting victim, and then ultimately the one who gets the upper hand on them. And her boyfriend didn't need to be in the story at all, like Steve or whatever his name was. He was a complete waste of screen time to me. He's like, say what you will about Johnny Depp, Nancy's boyfriend in Nightmare on Elm Street. At least he had an iconic kill to make his role memorable. Well, you know, he served a purpose. Steve, he just shows up, he's dating Christy, has some moments of dialogue and little kissy-kissy with her. Or he saves her from the house as it's falling down at the end of the first film. You know, she and him both watch that hell dragon hobo fly off with the box at the very end. Yeah, they never explain that. And then, I think from the second film onward, he just kind of disappeared out of the story.
He is never seen and heard from again.
It's and like, also, did they break up? Did he get killed off screen? Or did it's like, did they even explain what happened to him?
And also, why did she get locked up in a mental institution? He didn't. How did they separate? Or why did they separate? Like, why was she the one that went to a mental institution and he didn't? Like,
yeah, because he was the smart one. He denied everything he saw.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
Whereas Christy probably went to the police about it.
Yeah, she shouldn't have done that. Like, that's another problem that I have with too, is why the fuck did she, or how she ended up getting committed? Because she probably tried to tell them the truth, and she was naive enough to think they were going to believe her. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Just like Andy's mom in Child's Play 2.
Another issue I have is that they misused Lance Henriksen in a later sequel of Hellraiser and Hellworld, because it was supposed to be like a Nightmare on Elm Street, a new Nightmare, where basically In that world, it's revealed Freddy Krueger is real, or he became real. In Hellworld, Hellraiser, Pinhead's revealed to actually be real, apparently. And he had some game and a bunch of other shit based off of him. Like, how the fuck does that happen? You're telling me that this was like a self-referential thing, that Hellraiser, in the Hellraiser universe, Pinhead was actually real, and they went, I don't even know what the fuck they did in Hellworld, but that's basically what they were implying, that he was real, basically, in a different universe where the Hellraiser films were just filmed, just like with the Nightmare on Elm Street, A New Nightmare. That didn't make any sense whatsoever. How the fuck? And then they misused Lance Henriksen in that film. They could have used him for something better.
Yeah. Fun fact, for those listening, bit of trivia. I heard that Lance Henriksen was actually supposed to play Frank in the first Hellraiser originally. But before the actor who ended up getting cast as him took the role, I think he was one of the first choices, or the first choice considered to play Frank. Which would have been interesting, because I like Lance Henriksen. Like, I've never seen him give a bad performance.
He was Bishop in Alien, man. Come on.
Yeah.
In Alien 2.
And before that, he was the main protagonist in Pumpkinhead. Like, so many people sleep on Pumpkinhead.
Like, he was a sex addict, so I think Clive Barker kind of addressed that a little bit in his novella, the first book. That
The Hellbound Heart.
Yes, that basically in the book, Frank, the character, the book version of him, was given an orgasm so intense that it was all of them that he ever experienced in his lifetime.
Oh my God! That's a lot of nuts!
So, if the concept is that Cenobites don't know the difference between pain and pleasure, I have a feeling they still do know something about pleasure. That I guess what they basically got Frank off so high off of a climax that was not possible on Earth. That's how he knew he went beyond the limits. I'm assuming that was not pain. I don't know. I don't know if that was ever explicitly addressed in the films, but I get the feeling that that's what they tried to do with Cenobites. They tried to get you off way beyond anything that was possible on Earth. At the same time, yeah, they gave you pain too, but I would assume that they would try to have done that. I don't know, but I don't really know if that's the correct interpretation. If that there was some sexual gratification, or if it was meant to just be you're just going to be flayed alive, and that's the pleasure too.
I think it's everything under the sun. I have to ask you real quick, as we wind down here, what do you think Frank meant by that iconic line, "Jesus wept," right before the chains tear him apart? Because I've heard so many different interpretations of that line.
I think what he's referring to is the fact that, if Jesus Christ was this son of God and this powerful being and entity, that he even had a moment of vulnerability by crying. That's my interpretation of that line, that Jesus was vulnerable too. He had a weakness, if you want to go there. That's why
like moments of weakness, moments of...
Yeah, I think that's what he was alluding to with that quote, my take on it. I don't know if you've heard that version before.
I've heard a few different interpretations over the years. I don't know which one is the quote objectively correct one. I don't know if Clive Barker even knows. I think that line was
my take on it. To show
I think that line was something they maybe just made up for the movie. Maybe it was something that I think, I could be wrong, but I heard that line was improvised. At least if it was, I don't know what the intent was behind it.
But then also, I guess, like, if you think back to the crucifixion, the pain he must have felt of the nails going through his hands and his feet, that's what Frank was alluding to, that Jesus wept because of the pain that he experienced. Or also the interpretation that Jesus had a moment of vulnerability and weakness because of the pain. That's just my interpretation, but I don't know anything more beyond that. That's what I would assume that's what they were referencing, that he cried because of the pain of the crucifixion.
if I had to pick like a second favorite effect from the Hellraiser franchise, that would definitely be it. Like that iconic death of, Frank's, his stolen skin just being stretched by those chain hooks, and like that last look of him just kind of grinning, and right before the chains somehow make him explode into pieces from how hard they pulled. It's like drawn and quartering, like what they used to do with ropes and horses as a barbaric way to execute people. It's basically that, but taken to a completely different level without the horses.
Also, it kind of seals home the quote that he said originally, that will tear your soul apart. So what does he do to Frank? He literally tears him apart. So it really but that's what I'm wondering about that line. So couldn't you interpret what he said there, that the famous line of "will tear your soul apart," to be both literally and figuratively? Since he did that to Frank and countless other people, he literally tore them apart.
Maybe.
So,
because you could argue that Frank even after he got Larry's skin, Frank wasn't fully alive. Like he was violating the natural law by regenerating himself. So you could debate whether he was technically living, or if he was human, or if he was just something in between wearing a human skin. And because when Christy scratches him, and like after discovering, that it's not her dad, like that skin claws so easily. It's like it's almost like rotten flesh.
No, but then another thing I'm thinking is, what doesn't make sense is, okay, if before that scene where he puts on his brother Larry's skin, Julia was killing these guys and Frank was somehow feeding with them to regenerate his tissue,
like assimilating them.
So he didn't do that to Larry. He just somehow peeled the skin off. Like that doesn't make any sense. Why didn't he just rejuvenate? Like that's another thing, because I think that explains why she was able to claw his skin off. Because I don't think he was able.
I have no idea how Frank does the stuff he does with that.
No, but they never addressed that. How, if they assimilated Larry, or if he just put on the skin by peeling the skin off of the body.
And one thing someone else brought up from one of the retrospectives I watched, and this was a very good point that never occurred to me. Frank says that blood specifically is what puts flesh back on his bones. Like that's what he says, right? So why then does Julia go out trying to seduce men over to kill them, when she could have just, cut herself, not advocating, self-mutilation like suicide or anything, but why didn't Julia just offer him, a steady supply, a non-lethal steady supply of her own blood, like an IV that he could just feed off of? Why didn't she just steal blood from a blood bank?
But you don't know how much blood he needed to rejuvenate to restore his body with tissue and skin.
Well, she didn't have to restore him that fast. Like it could have just been like if he had just been patient with her, then she could have just steadily
but I think he wanted to get
the
hell out of there, because no pun intended.
I don't know. I just that seems a little odd to me. Like it seems like a very inefficient way for Frank to fulfill his goal of regenerating if all he needs is blood. And for that matter, does it even have to be human blood? Did he ever say or imply that it had to be human specifically? Why couldn't she just bring him a bunch of animals? Like stray pets or squirrels or just keep adopting animals out of the pet store or something. I don't know. It's just they never go into exact detail on what the conditions for his regeneration are. Just don't.
I don't know, like that. I mean, well, it's interesting your interpretation that you don't think that, and I think other people who theorize with Hellraiser, that what was shown in Hellraiser 2, the Labyrinth, that there are people that believe that wasn't hell. I don't know. I disagree. Like, I thought Clive Barker's intent was that it was supposed to be depicting the Christian hell, That's where the Cenobites lived in. That they were that they weren't in their own separate thing. That was actually hell. But I don't know. Like, I know various people have interpretations about it because if that's the case, then are they trying to say that this character Leviathan is actually Satan, but he goes by another name? They never explain that either. So where does Leviathan figure into this? Like, is he a subordinate to Satan, or is he Satan himself just taking on that moniker? Clive Barker, or there's no explanation of that either.
And again, that's one of the things that makes it so scary, is because of how much we never learn about it. It's beyond our understanding. Yeah,
I think it's case by case.
He said, yes, it is. And in the case of Hellraiser, is like, it's implied I'm speaking in the case of Hellraiser here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all that we got. Almost 2 hours here. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll cut it.
Okay.
Yeah, which, in your opinion, is the worst Hellraiser film? You know, it's an easy choice to pick your favorite one, because the best one, most people agree, is either going to be the first or the second, most likely the first. But which do you think is the worst out of all of them?
Revelations. That 2011 reboot that they used to retain the rights of the franchise. Dimension Films produced it. It was Doug Bradley wasn't even Pinhead. It was some other actor, and the makeup was so horrible. And apparently, I don't even know if it was supposed to be a fucked up prequel or sequel or whatever the fuck it was, because basically about these people that go down to Mexico, found footage shit, and I don't even know what the hell that movie was supposed to be about. I would say that easily that was worse than Hell World at Hellseeker and Inferno, if we want to go there.
Oh, I forgot about Inferno.
But yeah. I don't know which one you think is the worst entry of the franchise.
Probably that one, and I'd probably agree. Just from what I've seen of the later films, it's like what I remember from them. It's like, if there's one genre that Hellraiser does not go hand in hand with at all, it's
worse than Deader.
It's found footage. Yeah,
it's worse than no. And really quick, Hellraiser Deader, there's an issue with the Le Marchand lineage. So Le Marchand, somehow between the events of Le Marchand, the original Le Marchand, who constructed the original puzzle box in the 1700s in Paris, France. In Deader, one of his descendants is apparently a guy that's trying to be part of this death cult to revive people, to bring them back or have them live forever. And so this guy is messing with hell like Delisle. Like, he's trying to do something I don't know what the fuck he was doing. And Pinhead, I just know Pinhead said, you should have stayed in the family business. You are descended from an ancestry of a toy maker. You should. And then he has the audacity to tell Pinhead, you can't hurt me. Are you fucking kidding me? Do you even know who you're talking to there, man? You're talking to a demon from hell. A guy that literally has done this countless times over the centuries, and they're going to do it again to you, buddy. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Just one of the most creatively brilliant titles in the franchise, too. Hellraiser Deader. I would love to know who came up with that one.
Well, I was going to say you can't get any deader for the franchise in that installment, but I think Revelation said, "Hold my beer."
They really should just. At this point, I wouldn't even try to reboot or remake Hellraiser. I would just leave it alone.
They want to do a Hulu series, I've heard.
And
my understanding.
It just stop. It's like, how much money are you going to get out of this?
They're trying to milk it like Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, whatever the hell you call that franchise now.
But Jurassic World at least still has money to be made from it to a point. It's like, how
even
much
though
is
they're
there left
ruining
to really
the story.
make out of Hellraiser?
Even though they're but Star Wars 2 is trying to milk it too. How many spin-offs are you going to do? There's only so many spin-offs of that for that franchise you can do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hellraiser was pretty limited to begin with in terms of how much you could merchandise it compared to other horror IPs.
And with Jurassic Park, there is a lot of stories to be told, but the way that the direction they're going with it is the wrong way, and why they're ruining the franchise, in my opinion. There, but that's a whole different conversation. But
Yeah.
Hellraiser, I do agree. There has to be a certain point where you cut off, just like with Halloween with Michael Myers.
And that's it for this episode of Horror Convos. Comment below. How did you get into Hellraiser? Which entries are your favorites or least favorites? Do you agree with our takes on the franchise? Do you also have a habit of saying Christy when you meant Kirsty? Don't be shy with those opinions. Remember, this is more than a podcast. It is a dialogue between horror lovers. If you'd like to hear more about Hellraiser, including a retrospective that covers the entire franchise up to this point in film, you can check out my video linked in the description below by Dr. Jordan Breeding. Here is your regular reminder that Horror Convos is available to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. If you'd like to be a guest, remember to email keithhorrorconvos@yahoo.com. New episodes release every other Wednesday, so please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss when our newest content is uploaded. Until we talk again, good night and be well.